41 years, Congressmember Frank Pallone Jr. has represented most of Middlesex and Monmouth counties, and now in his 16th term is wrestling with issues like prescription drug pricing and energy infrastructure, and now impeachment. He joins Brianna Vannozzi.
Safe to say that Democrats, House Democrats, are frustrated over what to do next with Robert Mueller's statement. There's talk about sending a subpoena. Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, reportedly told Politico that she would rather see President Trump in prison than impeached. Where does the caucus go from here?
Well, I think the frustration is that basically the president has said that he's not honoring any subpoenas, right? So he's instructing everyone who works for him, everyone in the administration, not to honor any subpoenas. And so he denies the whole oversight function of Congress, which is so important. I mean, if Congress doesn't, have some oversight over federal agencies. After all, we pass the bills, but when you pass a bill, there has to be follow through by the agency. Otherwise, the bill doesn't mean anything. And so that's the frustration. But on the other hand, a lot of us realize that impeachment doesn't seem like much of an option either, because the Senate will never take it up and have a trial.
Is there enough to convict him?
I don't think so. I mean, so far, there's only one Republican in the House who's, been arguing for impeachment, and in the Senate, you would need 2/3, I believe.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you about this really wide-ranging infrastructure bill that you've been doing quite a bit to get support for, the Lift America Act. How does this, in the materials that I've read about it, it sort of targets climate change. There's a big chunk of money for it, but how? How is it going to combat that?
Well, within our committee's jurisdiction, you have things like upgrading the electricity grid, better pipeline maintenance, moving towards renewables.
$33 billion for clean energy is
exactly. So the whole idea is that by reducing your fossil fuel footprint, if you will, and having more efficiency, for example, with by upgrading your electricity grid or pipeline maintenance, less greenhouse gases are emitted, and so you address climate change that way. So, the bill has a lot of energy efficiency provisions. It has, basically upgrading the grid, the pipelines, and then it incentivizes, if you will, renewables over traditional fossil fuels. So all that would add up to a tremendous impact in terms of less greenhouse gases.
How do you move a bill like this forward when the president has himself rolled back U.S. climate laws, even after his own agencies have warned against it?
Well, that's a good question. Now, the president and most of the Republican leadership deny that climate change is human-induced, right? So the advantage of an infrastructure bill and using an infrastructure bill to achieve these goals is that you don't have to say that you're necessarily doing anything that's going to impact our footprint on climate change.
He said it goes both ways most recently.
Yeah, in other words, you can do these things without talking about climate change. Of course, I will talk about it, but if you're a Republican, you can say, well, I want to upgrade the electricity grid and I want to improve pipeline maintenance and not say anything about climate. So it's a way of achieving a reduction in greenhouse gases without Republicans having to say that that's what they're doing. I mean, I know it's a little deceptive, but this is what we're up to these days.
I want to ask you about another initiative you've been working on, prescription drug pricing. There's also a split between the progressive wing of the caucus and the more moderate wing of the caucus about how this bill is being drafted. What does it do to target prescription drug pricing? Well,
the bill that we're working on now is basically saying that you would have negotiated prices under Medicare. In other words, the government, in this case the Department of Health and Human Service, would negotiate prices with the drug companies in order to have them be part of the Medicare program. How you go about that may differ with some members, Democrat, Republican, or whatever, but I think most of us on a bipartisan basis, including the president, think that needs to be done. Now, that's one thing, but we already passed bills in the House with generics. Generics, 90% of the prescription drugs people take have a generic alternative,
sure,
which is very competitive, and so we've been encouraging more generic drugs. We passed 2 bills that basically forbid generic brand name companies from paying generic companies not to bring drugs to market.
So this should allow more generics.
And next, creates more competition for generics. So there's a bunch of things. Most of this is pretty bipartisan in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and even the president supports it. But yes, we still have to figure out exactly how to do the negotiated prices.
Always got your work cut out for you. Congressman Frank Pallone, thanks for stopping in to speak with us.
Thanks so much.